one night, they had an object on radar. I'm going to use his language. Little men that look like the color of a Sicilian, kind of brown, but 39 inches tall. They are kind of materialized around them and then dematerialized off using this technology, this very advanced trans-dimensional physics.
In the documentary, you talk about some of the UFO technology. The metal is so pure it cannot be replicated. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we think, if you're driving a car or flying on a Boeing 737 or whatever, we dig that stuff up, aluminum and metal. We smelt it, refine it, roll it, put it together, rivets, welding, etc. An extraterrestrial vehicle and all its components are not made that way. They are made by creating a sort of an ultrasonic, very high-tech wave that pulls, let's call it the substrate, the elementals that are subatomic, together on, if you can visualize this, like almost like a blueprint in energy, and it materializes it. So it's seamless. Even the parts that are in it, anything that's energy or electronic related, is on a nanomolecular level entwined in it. But this is why it's very hard to study this stuff. I mean, it's not like taking apart a Soviet MiG or something. I know the men who worked on these projects, and I mean, you're dealing with really extraordinary, elegant, beautiful material sciences and matter. And that's why the materials are so pure, because they're not dug up and refined. They're actually assembled from this baseline energy-matter interface in space-time. And make it real for you. There was a captain on a Navy contract vessel back in 62 or 3, and before he died, he contacted me. Great guy. And he had been, they were testing the Atlas rockets for intercontinental ballistic, but these didn't have nukes on them. They were testing the rocket and guidance systems way back. And they had a lot of UFO sightings because the ETs were watching how we were developing in kind of this breakout speed with thermonuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic, Cold War. And one night, they had an object on radar. It was triangulated. They had it on ship radar. So the captain has this guy say, hey, look, we have this boogie. And then it got confirmed from the command center. And they said, because they were able to do that, unfortunately, they triangulated it, and it was hit with some kind of weapon. This was 63. And it dropped, boom, like a rock right into the South Atlantic Ocean. So he was vectored over to the estimated point of impact and was there to retrieve it. And I have his whole story. And he never wanted to come forward because even when he had to have surgery once, they had an intelligence guy in there when he was under anesthesia to be sure he didn't talk about this. But I have his whole information. So what happened is that when he got to the site, there was about a 6x6 pod, and they pulled it up on the ship. And it wasn't the whole craft. The whole craft had gone down, but apparently there was some sort of one molded thing, and there were 4, I'm going to use his language, little men that look like the color of a Sicilian, kind of brown, but 39 inches tall, no hair, and also no external ears, no pinna, flaps, very fine featured. But the reason he contacted me, and this is why this is so funny, I've debriefed over 1,000 men like this. He said, I can't figure out how they got in and out of their uniforms. So they had a one-piece uniform. Now, no zipper and no buttons and no visible way they could get them out of this thing. And he says, how do they put them on? I said, well, they don't need a zipper or a button because they are kind of materialized around them and then dematerialized off using this technology, this very advanced trans-dimensional physics. And he went, oh my God, I would have never done it. I said, no, I mean, it's how they're doing it. So this is why people who encounter an actual ET craft or the EBENs, extraterrestrial biological entities, and they see even their clothing, none of it tracks because it's so far advanced.
Well, there was another maybe, I can't remember if it was one or two of the whistleblowers that spoke about this. They spoke about, or maybe it was you talking about it, but when they got into the craft, the inside of the craft seemed almost infinite.
Yep. Yep. That was one of my, I was representing a whistleblower who is not ready to be unmasked yet. He still doesn't want to be known publicly. But yes, because you have a dimensional space shift as well. So an object that looks 30 feet across, you go in, and it was so big, you could, if you'd thrown a football, you couldn't hit the other side of it. So, you know, again, all of this gets into an understanding of physics that, unfortunately, you know, we're not teaching our kids the real physics, the science of anything. I mean, we're all locked 100 years. This is the other part of the lost century I talk about, is that it has to do with medical technologies. I mean, as a doctor, I've seen some things that, oh my God, if we had that, the lives that could be saved. Spinal cord regeneration of lost limbs.
You've seen this stuff.
Yeah. At an underground lab on the Mexican-Texas border. Yeah. Sad. Yeah.
How are you getting access to this?
The people who like what I'm trying to do, that are in the system, take me. And I went to one place, a very funny story, and they had, you know, they had the Marines there. You know, there was all these checkpoints, and the guy said, finally we got to the last one, and this was a facility, I won't say where it was, but I mean basically World War III, for all submarines to be run out of there. And my escort, my military advisor, finally we got to this last point where you go into the inner, you know, it's this huge place, deep, and the guy goes, and what is Dr. Greer here for? And he says, you don't have a need to know. So he played the same need to know thing. So I went in. So beyond full disclosure, I've never worked for the government or a contractor. I have no clearances. I don't want a clearance. But there are people who know that what we're doing, we're fighting the good fight. And the people in the system, a lot of them are very good people. This is what a lot of people need to understand. They got trapped in a system where you get read into more and more of these compartments. Next thing you know, you're in something. And the guys, as I say this, I want to make a call for more whistleblowers watching to come out. There are guys out there watching your show, Delta Force, Navy SEAL, people in aerospace industry, various military commands that have dealt with or seen this, and they need to come forward because now there's a safe pathway for them to do it. And if you're corporate, now there's a 6-month clock on you. And we let me be very clear. We know who you are and where your assets are. And after those 6 months, you're subject to criminal prosecution, and you'll be lucky if that's all you're subject to. So this is getting very serious right now. That's why I'm on your show.
There's a 6-month window.
Yep.
When does that expire?
From the date this bill is finally signed. I mean, it's out of committee, it's going to be voted, and then it's an amendment to the intelligence bill.
Okay, so it's not actually, we're not wrapped up with that
No,
yet.
it's done. It's pretty much, it's done.
But it's not in effect yet.
I'll have to ask my guy who's shepherding it through.
I had complete access to every compartment they manufactured. It's the world's largest directed energy weapons system. It is responsible for the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand. There's just another level of craft on this planet and another level of air traffic control tower that exists. This is that facility.
Raytheon is an aerospace company that provides advanced systems and services for commercial, military, and government customers worldwide. Probed for corruption in government contracting since 1980s. You were in the South Pole from 2010 to 2011. Let's talk about what you were doing down there.
You got it.
What were you doing down there?
I was contracted for the summer season as a plumber. I did well enough in my summer season to garner a winter contract as well, which got me my full year's stay. I was also tasked with being a firefighter. I was a lead on the firefighting team, and because of that dual role capacity, I physically held a key that opened every single door in the facility. I had complete access to every compartment they manufactured. that was a rare position to be in.
What are you blowing the whistle on?
That there are technologies at the South Pole Station that people can't even consider that exist on this planet.
Like what?
Directed energy weapon systems is something that people need to get in their vocabulary fast. The ice cube neutrino detector is not simply a passive listening device as presented for the science that they're claiming it to do. It also has the capacity to transmit. There are embedded in the ice what are called digital optical modules, DOMs. They're about the size of a basketball. The array embedded in the ice is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. It is the world's largest telescope. And now, because we have proven that it can transmit, it's the world's largest directed energy weapons system. It is responsible for the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2011 on the front end of the year.
How do you know for a fact that that was responsible for that?
Because I was present and I have gone over this with the pertinent people that I will not be releasing their names.
Okay.
But I was on the team, let's just say, and I've confirmed this.
Well,
I've provided documentation from the actual manufacturer's specs. So this unit was constructed, operated, and maintained by the University of Wisconsin, and just like every other device on the planet, whether you're driving an M1 Abrams tank or operating the ice cube neutrino detector, there's operator's manuals that tell you how things work. Right there in that information, free for everybody to find. I found it myself. I was directed to find it, I'll put it that way, and release this information. And it states very clearly that each one of these DOMs can transmit at 2,047 volts each. So these are currently the facts of life.
how do you know? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, how did it even come to your attention that this triggered an earthquake? If you're at the South Pole and New Zealand had an earthquake, I mean, how did you know it came from the South Pole?
Without divulging names,
Without divulging names.
I could only say that it was communicated to me from team members that were present and fully read in at the time that they were aware. And since that time,
At the immediate, like the same day?
oh, absolutely, it was understood
Well, what was said?
that we accidentally hit Christchurch, New Zealand twice when they were trying to fire up this weapon for the first time. That it was friendly fire. It was not on purpose, but it occurred. That the system is designed for that. And it was just friendly fire.
So
Incidental.
this is a telescope. That sounds like a. Is it a telescope? or is-
Absolutely. It is a neutrino detector, for sure. It can accomplish its primary purpose. It can also transmit and then provide a multifaceted platform for directed energy weapons systems.
Do you have any idea how the earthquake was initiated?
From misfiring the system.
Where
Where were they targeting?
Yes.
I don't know.
Does it go into the earth? Does it go
can-
into the atmosphere?
It can definitely go through the earth. I would consider that it might be able to do stuff in the atmosphere. I haven't heard that statement laid at its feet, but I wouldn't put it past it. I don't want to try to limit the functions of this device by my imagination or experience. I believe that's one of the problems with directed energy weapons is they are not like standard weapons of old where you have a gun and a particular caliber bullet, you pull the trigger and it does one thing. These platforms are way more complex than that. They do a lot of things.
What else do they do?
Excuse me. This system, additionally, in regards to the neutrinos, it detects the neutrinos that are apparently coming off of the new exotic propulsion systems for either off-world UFOs or reverse-engineered stuff on our planet.
What is neutrino?
Neutrino is a near massless particle that goes at, close, or beyond the speed of light. It is so small that it can pass between the electron shell and the nucleus of pretty much every atom on the planet. In the capacity of being detected at the South Pole Station, when the neutrino impacts the nucleus of the water molecule of the ice in the glaciers at the pole, a reaction occurs. The nucleus and the neutrino become destroyed. A muon is created and ejected, and a blue flash of light known as Cherenkov radiation flashes in the ice, and that's what the DOMs, the digital optical modules, are detecting. That's their primary purpose as presented. Now, whether that neutrino comes from a quasar out in space or a exotic propelled engine off of vehicles that aren't being discussed contemporarily, it detects it, thus making it basically an air traffic control center for all non-discussed vehicles on this planet. So just like we have all the other air traffic on the planet and it's being completely observed and attended to, there's just another level of craft on this planet and another level of air traffic control tower that exists. This is that facility.
Back to tracking neutrinos. What is that? Why are they tracking those?
Oh, for the purposes of science, they're claiming that there's a lot to be ascertained by understanding the difference between low power and high power neutrino ejections from cosmic occurrences. It's about that vague. This is what they spend our tax dollars on.
Let's talk about what else do they do?
The device is also for faster than light communications, quantum entangled communications at great distance. In, I guess it was the late 80s or early 90s, Gary McKinnon hacked NASA. And he found the list of the off-world space fleet and the captains of the ships respectively. We have a fleet out there. If we have a fleet out there, we need to communicate with them. This is that facility.
For people who don't know, 2009 during this operation, that's why we're responding, obviously with the humanitarian nature of this, because 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, that's mainly what the expertise is, at least as far as Marines go. It's not really combat operations for the most part, even though Indonesia, among other parts in that world, are large networks for terrorists and insurgents. So having that expertise of going in and try to help people, I think is also good to us because it teaches you the balance of it. Instead of being a war fighter, you actually get to help people. Instead of launching bullets at people, you're still helping people in a different cause. You still get to be heroes for people, which is great. So totally incidental as far as our encounter. When we went onto the slope, because we had our LZ, it was a hasty LZ, and they're dropping supplies. They have, a bunch of stuff, and it's other helos too. They're just kind of forming a perimeter on the city, dropping Marines here. You could provide overwatch. Now, the only thing that's unsettling with this is the fact that they never gave us any comms. You know as well as I do how risky that is.
You didn't have any comms?
We didn't have any comms.
Interesting.
So the Marine that was with me, it was a higher rank than me, was very pissed off about it because he was a Fallujah Marine, so he went through a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And one of those things, I remember him kept telling me, he's like, if everything ends up going to shit, and you look at me and if I'm fine, it means that you're going to be fine. And I remember him telling us all that in the stick, and he's a good Marine. He's a very outstanding guy. I learned a lot from him during my time in. And I thought about that concept, but then he started picking things apart too. He wasn't very comfortable with that. But luckily the thing is that we were still relatively, close enough to the LZ, because when the bird was supposed to land, because obviously they were coming in, dropping the supplies, and they'd bank off. The last one that would come down would land. That's when we'd basically run to the helo, 300 meters. You're in good shape, and you have an average combat load, 120 rounds, so to speak, with an M16A4 and a Camelback. Not really much, so you can make that trek relatively quick. But they also have security on those birds too. With the flight crew, with the gunners on the sides, they had 50s on them. So if there is some opposition, they're going to meet with those on top of us engaging them. So we were positioned near the slope. It wasn't like a steep grade or anything, but it was enough to obscure what was going on the other side that we had no idea what was going on. So we got, naturally you want to take the high ground so you have observation of everything. And this is when we came across this operation. And it was something that stuck out like a sore thumb because here you have terrain that is a jungle terrain, very green vegetation, things like that. And then you have something that's sticking out right in the middle of an opening. And it looks very odd. It's something that's, I'll remember till the rest of my life. To the day that I leave this earth, I'm going to remember seeing that. And it's just imprisoned up here. I had a camera with me. It was a Panasonic cheap camera. It had kind of like, ancient compared to what you got set up in the studio, But it was enough, at least, because it was part of stuff that I've never did a humanitarian assistance before. So I was taking videos of them dropping stuff off, things like that, until we trekked up to this point. Was taking some pictures because it's a place you would never really ever go to, at least the real part of Indonesia. It's not like Bali or Surabaya where it's like touristy stuff.
Yeah.
This is where it's actual cultured people. You're actually seeing reality here. So it's stuff that I kind of wanted to document and just say, I was a part of this. I can look back and say, I remember that. But then looking north past that slope and seeing that down, and I took some video and some pictures of that. And I had, I stuck it in my dump pouch. I was a saw gunner naturally, so I had M249. That was my favorite weapon. I liked having a belt-fed machine gun. As much as a pain in the ass, I liked having that compared to an M16 or an M4. So because we were in the humanitarian, all they did was give us M16A4s. They had RCOs at that time. They weren't the ACOGs. They had the mills on the sides for windage and stuff like that, as well as the PEC-15s. So if we were doing any kind of night range or night operation, we'd have those with our PVS-14s. So it's just a very basic loadout that we were doing. Nothing really crazy. And when we saw this happen, and I want to say unidentified because right now it's identified. Everybody knows what they are now. They're either man-made or they're not. And if they're not, the government's coming out and telling people, admitting it, not directly, but they're still admitting it to a degree that it exists. Because why would they spend time with this legislation coming out?
That's a good point.
Why would they do that? If it doesn't exist, why were they going through these measures to basically hold a gun up to these guys' heads and say, you better relinquish this technology or else? They're not just doing it, and knowing and seeing this unfold, even being in this position of having to brief the Senate Intelligence among the Special Intelligence Service too, which oversees the letter agencies, because they have no idea what's going on either. But the fact that all of us coming together and making this loud amount of noise to get something done about it is just astounding. And now they're finally, for the first time in history, they're going through with this and actually trying to do something about it for their own understanding, but also know the corruption that comes from this.
Yeah.
It's multiple different facets.
I mean, you guys already, all five of you, right, already testified in front of Congress?
So we testified to people of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which where there's some Congress people there as well as some senators.
So in front of the Intelligence Committee by the Senate?
And
Senate.
And as well as I do, in any kind of setting like that, whether you're in a SCIF, it's all under oath still, because they're having you sign NDAs and things like that. So you're expected to be truthful with this. Mm-hmm. And seeing the reaction,
big deal.
It is a very big deal. It was nerve-wracking at first because I'm not used to talking to government officials in that nature. And having the support that they've been giving me as well as the protection is just something that I'm very thankful for. I'm very thankful that they all have open minds of this subject. Even though for years there's been a stigma to it. For years there's been a giggle effect because of little green men and flying saucers and all that. I myself never thought to this day that I'd ever see anything like this.
How he got tied in to do the work around McKellar's Lodge during the SF compounds, I have no idea. We didn't talk about that in that sense. So, I just assumed it was the guys that he had met, and I knew him well enough just not to ask questions. They got the bids into where it
needed to go.
Say again?
They got the bids into where it needed to go.
Right.
Okay.
And it's not like it was a public bid. Not everyone could. Yeah. Because I imagine there were things that they weren't supposed to see, and we just weren't naturally curious people. So it's not like they had to worry about us saying anything.
Yeah.
The day that I met him up there, like I said, the escort comes to meet us. It's one of the guys that he knew that he had hunted with. I didn't know this gentleman. But they pick us up in a van. We get in the back of it. They take us out about 15 minutes. And I could tell it was going towards the direction. I don't know if you're familiar with Fort Bragg.
I'm not.
Okay. There's only one direction you can go to get to the live fire ranges, to get to the drop zones and things like that. So I assume we were headed towards Sicily or Normandy drop zone because that was the direction we were going. The van that they had us in, it didn't have any windows. You couldn't see to the front. It was just a cattle car. And we were joking they were going to take us away, ask him what he did, and we're going to head to Leavenworth for a little while. But we get there, and as soon as the door opened, it looked like a literal dump There was just trash everywhere. Not like people just leaving stuff out. It was an actual dump. There was a 45-degree concrete door setting out of one of these hills that was directly in front of us, no further than you and I are to each other now. And so we go inside, meet another escort in there, take us to this freight elevator. We get in there, 2 series of buttons, didn't have any writing on it. One of the guys looks at my dad as saying to both of us, keep your head down, your eyes on the heels of the man in front of you, or you'll be shot. And we kind of started giggling because, at least I knew one of the guys was one of his buddies, people that he used to hang out with. And the other guy, I recognized him as the guy who we went hunting with before. I knew later on that they were both Delta operators. If they were still active, I have no clue.
Do you know their names?
I do.
Do you want to
No,
say their names?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And I'll tell you later why. But yeah, hell no.
So you're seeing familiar faces, which makes you comfortable,
Right.
And you don't realize how.
The shitstorm I just stepped into? Yeah, absolutely not.
What exactly were you guys there to do?
What he told me was that we were going down below ground to set up a shoot house.
Okay.
An indoor live fire range that was going to be underground. Nothing new. Again, I didn't think anything of it. We had done other shoot houses before with the open tops that can be viewed from above.
Mm-hmm. With a catwalk.
It didn't
even phase you.
It was just another day at work.
Okay.
And I was just there to help him out. But we get down, the doors open, and the first thing I see are these personnel connexes off to my right, the smaller ones, not the larger ones that you see scattered around, or like the ones you'd see on a big rig carrying around. These were the small ones. You would throw your personal gear in to go before you get shipped overseas. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I looked past them, I could see this giant monolithic slab just sitting there. At first, it didn't, once again, it didn't set off any alarms. I didn't think much of it, but the closer we got to it, I could feel this intense vibration. But you couldn't hear anything. It was dead silent in there. The loudest thing was the footsteps that I could hear. And
what did the vibration feel like?
It felt like being at a concert, standing next to one of the speakers, and
without
the bass
the noise,
just permeating through your body without the noise.
There was zero noise.
Zero.
Just vibration.
Absolute zero. I could still hear myself breathing over this, but inside, it was such a strange feeling to have. So the closer I got, I was like, well, I got to check this out. So I go down to one knee, faking I got to tie my boots. And then I glance up underneath it, and there's absolutely nothing underneath this damn thing. Nothing holding it up whatsoever.
What did the slab look like?
It just looked like a granite slab, but the sheen on it is what caught my attention the most. It was kind of in between being polished or just completely translucent. There was something behind it, but you could tell it had a smooth surface to us. And the only lights that were on in that hangar that we were in were directly over our head where we were walking through that walkway. And
how big was the slab?
Oh, God. It was about 20 foot long. It was about 7 foot tall, and I couldn't tell how wide it was. By that point, I was already directly in front of it.
So there's it would be impossible for a human to even think about picking something like this up.
Oh, there's no way.
Okay.
Even with the construction that we've done, if you had to pick up something like that to move it anywhere, you would need at least 3-4 cranes.
Oh, wow.
Herrera could tell you better.
Okay.
The scope of equipment that it would take just to get it off the ground, not even to transport it to another location. But at this point, I'm still down on my knee, and I'm looking, and behind it, I can see 2 people standing. The only thing I can see is their feet, but there's this boulder directly behind it, and it's on the ground. And I glance over my shoulder, and there's a guy with his back turned to me standing in front of another boulder identical of the other one that I could see up underneath the monolithic slab, and he's just pushing it with one hand. And then I assume he's pushing it in the other direction because it's just freely spinning, no wobble. It's like it was attached to the top and the bottom, and it was paper mache. That's how easily this guy was just spinning it around. Wow. Now, at this point, the escort behind me kicks me in the back, says, "Let's go." So we get up, keep going, go down a flight of stairs. That's when we get to what we call the shoot house. You could see old lanes where they had actually used it before as a live fire range underground. And we'd probably only been down there 20 minutes maybe. Father was taking notes on the dimensions, what we needed, what I guess he understood what they wanted. And I know that we had to replace the walls. It's inconsequential to the story, but we had to replace the rubber on the walls for the shoot house. And in that amount of time, we go back upstairs, exact same route that we took on the way down, and everything's empty when we get to the hangar again. Everything, the two boulders in the back, the monolithic slab, all of it is absolutely gone. And we weren't, 100 yards below these guys. We were just one flight below them. So whatever it was that they were taking out, we would have heard it. Even the people making noise around it, you would have still been able to hear. But it was dead silent. Like I said before, there was nothing in there. Just our feet. But coming back through, it was absolutely gone. Everything in there just vacated. And at that point,
how much time had passed?
Less than 30 minutes. Less than 30 minutes. Because it didn't take us long to do what we had to do downstairs. And
this was just an assessment. You guys weren't actually, you weren't doing any construction or repairing the walls or anything. It was just this is what we need to do. So there was no equipment that you were operating that would have muffled any sound that was going on above the
right. Taking measurements, layouts. The loudest thing was the tape measure we were using. That, a roll tape, and a notebook. That was it. That was the only thing that. That was the only thing we had down there.